Everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Denise Savachow. I'm the chair of the Water Planning Council's advisory group, Outreach and Education Work Group. And we're so pleased to have everybody join us today for our third webinar in a series called Realizing Resilient Watersheds. We are really excited about the program we have today. Just to let you know, and we'll post some stuff in the chat, that all of our past webinars are on the Water Planning Council's website, on our Outreach and Education Workgroup website. And I just want to thank a couple of folks who helped put this together, and that is Allie Hibbard from DEP. She's going to kind of do things behind the scenes and help us with the questions and answers at the end. And also Kelsey Sudal, who does all of our great graphics for getting out the program. So thanks to everyone who's been part of this, and to the Water Planning Council for helping us facilitate this and making sure that we have their full support in the webinars we're putting out today. So today, again, we're really pleased to be having this webinar, Restoring the Flow, Dam Removal in Connecticut. And we've got two great speakers, and I'm going to let them do their major introductions, but I'll just give a short bio and then they can get into a little bit more. Paul Woodworth is here today. He is the Senior Director of Ecological Restoration at Save the Sound and a project manager for the Kinneytown Dam Removal project. He's a certified ecological restoration practitioner and fluvial geomorphologist with 17 years experience in dam removal. And then following him is Aaron Boudris. Aaron is the Environmental Planning Director at the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments. He is overseeing the Kinneytown Dam Removal project in partnership with Save the Sound. Welcome, Paul and Aaron, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it right over to them, and Paul is going to start.
All right, hopefully you can all see the screen now.
It says it's loading. There it is. I see it.
Okay.
I'm assuming everybody else can see it. Somebody will speak up, I'm sure. If that,
yeah, we can see it.
Good, thank you. Thank you all for coming today for our webinar. We're happy to showcase our project that is going to define Aaron and my career, I think, for the number of years. Next slide, Aaron. We are going to touch on a couple different topics. I'm going to do some dam removal 101 overview, talk about dam removals in Connecticut. Then we'll hone in on the Naugatuck River and the Kinneytown Dam and the Kinneytown Dam Removal project, and leave hopefully some time for Q&A and discussion. Again, as I said, I'm the Senior Director of Ecological Restoration at Save the Sound. And if you don't know us, we're a leading environmental organization in this region. We could take legal action. We advocate for legislation and policy and environmental justice. We have an extensive water quality monitoring program with dozens of partners across Long Island Sound. We're active in land protection. And I happen to work under what we call the Alexander Center for Ecological Action and the Ecological Restoration Team, which does watershed planning, stormwater, green infrastructure, living shoreline and marsh restoration, road stream crossing assessments and prioritization, and of course, dam removal, which is just topic of today's discussion. So next slide, Aaron. So when we talk about dams in the U.S. and Connecticut, it's helpful to have some context here. The map on the left is a compilation of databases of 202,000 stream barriers across the country. That includes the 91,000 dams in the National Inventory of Dams by Army Corps, which is a drastic undercount of dams because it only looked at dams that were 25 feet or higher. Most of the dams in Connecticut are not 25 feet in height. And a lot of the dam safety databases across the states, including Connecticut's, are not perfectly complete. So this heat map here, this chickenpox map of the country, sort of shows where we sit in this array of barriers. And as you can see, in the Northeast, we're blessed, or we're doomed with a high density of stream barriers. Connecticut specifically has roughly 4,800 dams in our inventory. For a state that's blessed with about 5,800 miles of stream or river, that's still one dam for every 1.4 miles, which is an incredible density. Other states have similar dense areas, eastern Massachusetts and down East Maine, Rhode Island, but we somehow have no interior, and thus our entire state is pretty dam dense, maybe the most dam dense in the nation. So with that in mind, we are definitely actively pursuing dam removal. So next slide. So dams have a variety of ownerships and uses. The chart on the left showing how 3/4 of our dams in Connecticut are in private hands. About 11% are municipal owned. Less than 10% are state owned. A small fraction are public utility, as in serving a purpose. Federal dams are also small. Federal dams are usually Army Corps and thus flood control dams. And then there's a very small slice that are in tribal hands. In terms of uses, the uses are roughly 48 or almost a half are recreational or are labeled primarily for recreational purposes. About 40% are for conservation or agriculture. And then a small slice are for flood control, hydroelectric, and water supply. Water supply constitute about 6% of the dams across the state. So that paints a picture of quite a few dams across the state that probably aren't providing a huge benefit to a whole lot of people. Next slide. Dams are also classified by their hazard, which is very different than condition. Hazard classification is really the risk to life or property should the dam fail. Connecticut has this 5 gradations from negligible, low, moderate, significant to high. Most states have something similar, maybe not all 5 categories, and don't necessarily use the same letter system. And then in contrast to condition, which is really what is the condition of the dam as you're doing an inspection, the condition of the spillway, the abutments, any earth and berm, pertinent structures, the raceways, is the concrete cracking or spalling, is there vegetation or roots? And we usually rate that in good, fair, or poor. So looking at the figures, the images below, you can have a really small, low hazard dam that's in very poor condition. And conversely, you can have a high hazard dam on the right, which is a water supply dam in the Metropolitan District Commission, MDC, that's in a very good condition because it's very closely maintained and inspected and kept in good condition. So two contrasts there, not to be confused, hazard classification and condition. Aaron, next slide. When we talk about impacts of dams, they're pretty far-reaching and extensive, and they vary from the type of dam and the size of dam. But the primary one that everyone is that's pretty self-evident is the hydrologic and hydraulic. It alters the flow regime. Depending on how much control it has over water, it can dampen flood events, usually maybe by intention, maybe not. It could change the low flow condition as well. The geomorphic impacts are pretty far reaching. It traps sediment, tends to bury the substrate in the upstream areas in the impoundment. The trapping of the sediment in the impoundment means that it's depriving sediment into the downstream reaches. That usually triggers bed erosion or bank erosion or some kind of degradation in the physical habitat features. Water quality is an obvious impact. They tend to increase temperature because they're exposing water to direct sunlight. That tends to result in a decrease of dissolved oxygen. And then, of course, these impoundments can be subject to algal blooms, like harmful algal blooms, for example. And then the ecological impacts are also pretty self-evident. They block the movement of resident fish, but they're very importantly are blocking the migration of diadromous fish and other aquatic organisms in mussels, which rely on the movement of fish and in particular migratory fish, macroinvertebrates and reptiles and amphibians as well. And then, of course, there's the public safety factor. Even a small dam is a very dangerous drowning hazard in the way that it creates a hydraulic at the base of it. It looks like a great place to jump into on a hot summer day, but obviously they're very dangerous. They're hard to swim out of with water that's hyper frothed. It's very, very difficult to swim out of that kind of strong current there. And so drownings are a common occurrence at small dams across the country. Next slide, Aaron. Now, when we talk about dam removal, we are usually not talking about removing the dams that are big and providing us essential services. So on the left, upper left, the Chippewa Dam on the Houstonic River is still an active hydropower, feeds a lot of energy into the grid. Upper right is the Sayville Dam on the Farmington River. It's where my drinking water comes from that I have in my glass here, coming out of the Farmington River watershed. And then flood control dams like the one on the lower left, the Mad River Dam at Winstead. These are carefully maintained. They're usually providing a valuable service to us by dampening floods in urban areas, many of them built after the 1955 flood that ravaged a lot of the watersheds across the state. And in contrast to that, on the lower right is what we know as Strong Pond Dam or Dana Dam, which was a small dam built by a wealthy landowner at the time in the 30s to create a swimming area and an ice pond for ice fishing and swimming. It was a family activity only. Then it was transferred to the town at some point along the way. And this is a dam that's only 5 feet high and yet is a complete barrier, as much of a barrier to fish passage as the other bigger dams also on screen. So those are the dams. These small dams, and many of them former mill dams, are the ones that dominate the landscape and are more numerous than any of the other large dams that provide a value to us. Next slide, Aaron. So the benefits of the dam removal are basically flipping the impacts upside down. You restore a free-flowing condition in terms of hydrology and hydraulics. You restore the river habitat upstream. You can restore the habitat downstream, restoring the flow of sediment that has been depriving the downstream reaches. You get an almost instantaneous reduction in temperature and an increase in dissolved oxygen, and you eliminate algae blooms and former impoundments. Right after construction and literally on projects I've been on where the machines are still in the water after a dam has been removed, we've seen fish swim right through a active construction zone. So those are resident fish, but in due time, migratory fish will find their way in the migratory season. And the ones that we are focused on are these 5 here: American shad, blueback herring, alewife, sea lamprey, American eel. There's slightly different migratory patterns. All of them are forage fish. They in their healthy ecological state, they exist in vast numbers. They feed tons of other fish and wildlife up the food chain. They're foundational to the ecosystem, and they are in a severe depleted condition and have been for a number of years. And we are trying actively to restore these 5 fish back to their former abundance. Aaron, next slide. And it was mentioned I'm a certified ecological restoration practitioner, so I'd like to put in a plug for the Society for Ecological Restoration. They have international principles and standards for the practice of ecological restoration. They define ecological restoration as the process of assisting the recovery of an ecosystem that has been degraded, damaged, or destroyed. And ecological restoration aims to move a degraded system to a trajectory of recovery. And I won't stare at this screen too much, but these circular diagrams are a good, succinct way of identifying the ecological characteristics that projects like dam removal can drastically restore. And dams don't instantly restore rivers. They restore the processes that allow rivers to then go on a restoration trajectory that can take months or years or decades. And so that's where dam removal comes into play with ecological restoration. Aaron, next slide. So dams have been removed in Connecticut. American Rivers keeps a good active database. If you want to know more about projects around the state that have resulted, or around the country, actually, I encourage you to go to their website. They have a great online viewer. I plotted here just the dams removed in Connecticut. You can see a slow they've got records all the way going back to 1938, which was probably a failure during it was a rain on snow event, and 36 was a hurricane, and 38 I think was a rain on snow event. Those two double whammies probably knocked out a bunch of dams. So it's been a slow trickle, but you see a cluster of dams removed in 1999. Those happen to be corresponded with dams on the Naugatuck River upstream of our site. And then you see a flurry of activity in 2015 and 2016. Those are dams removed by Save the Sound and other partners at that time. And then there's been kind of a slow trickle of 1 to 3 dams in the years since. And that's not a pace that is keeping up. That's still 1,000 years out before we remove most of the obsolete dams. So we'd love to be able to pick this pace up at some point. And that's what we're trying to do, is sort of build capacity and knowledge across the state for folks that are in ownership or some sort of management role of dams to consider removal, especially if it's got ecological benefits. So next slide, Aaron. So I'm going to hit on a few case studies. I think I'm probably ahead of time, but Strong Pond Dam, as I mentioned, is our most recent dam removal in 2023. It's on the Norwalk River in Wilton, Connecticut. It was believed to be the most downstream barrier to migratory fish passage, and that we've since seen that since some flood events, there may be some other obstructions now that they have to contend with. But we are now doing eDNA monitoring on that river system to see how far up migratory fish are getting now that this dam was removed. It's about $3 million cost. It involved a lot of infrastructure protection. There's a rail line that's really close to the former impoundment, and a lot of sediment management, moving sediment around into a floodplain area out of the channel for ecological reasons. Next slide. Hyde Pond Dam was a project I worked on many moons ago with when I was in consulting for Save the Sound. This is on Whitford Brook in Mystic, Connecticut, so the other end of the sound. Less than $1 million total price tag, funded by Superstorm Sandy relief money. This was a very small dam that was very leaky. Actually had a fishway on it. Wasn't working because the dam was so leaky that the fishway wasn't getting enough water. That impoundment was very chock full of wetland vegetation, sediment and wetland vegetation, very low gradient system, so it didn't require a whole lot of manipulation. We took a very passive restoration approach, basically removed the dam, excavated a pilot channel, let the rest of the river do the work. And the site, frankly, hasn't changed drastically since then. It's a very complex stream wetland system there that's still very vibrant and home to a lot of native plants and wildlife. Next slide, please. Clark Brothers Dam is another dam that Save the Sound worked on and I worked on in consulting. It's on the Quinnipiac River in Southington, Connecticut, also completed in 2016, less than a $500,000 price tag. It's very small, former industrial mill dam. This is like very quintessential mill dam in Connecticut type scenario. Its impoundment was entirely contained within the riverbanks. There was sand built up behind it, but didn't require a whole lot of management, was not contaminated above background levels. And so there's a fairly simple, straightforward dam removal, despite the fact that there was infrastructure around the site. Next slide, Aaron. Carpenter's Dam is sort of a sister project. These two were done almost parallel to each other, also on the Quinnipiac Dam, a little bit further downstream in Southington, very close to the Meriden town line. Also completed in 2016, less than $1 million total. The picture on the upper left shows a concrete structure jutting out into the river and kind of ending halfway through because it actually had been breached. So it was almost 50% removed by nature and neglect. And we fully removed it to restore fish passage. And I will concede that this project got complicated because of other infrastructure. There was a water crossing, several water lines crossing the river just upstream of this impoundment. We separated those from this project, but in retrospect, it would have been important to do them all in one fell swoop. So a second year, a follow-up year involves stabilizing those water lines in place. And I think there's one more, Aaron, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so Pond Lily Dam is another project by Save the Sound on the West River, just on the northern border of New Haven, easily accessed off of the Route 15 there, just outside of the tunnel. Also completed in 2016, about $1 million total. Some channel work, and again, there was a bridge crossing upstream that had to be stabilized because it had a central pier right in the river where the river was still adjusting after dam removal. So, but again, a small dam, not much taller than we are, about 5 foot high, former mill dam. Lots of sediment behind it, but not a whole lot of sediment management. Some modest sediment management on site. So those are just some handful of examples that I think are fairly representative of the dams across the state that are being considered for removal. And I think from there, Aaron, I'll pass it back to you. And I'm happy to take more questions about any of those projects or anything else after this.
Thanks, Paul. And Paul, I'll ask you to hop in at any point if I miss anything or if you want to make a point.
Sure.
So that brings us to another case study that is underway. It's not complete, and it won't be for several years, but and much larger and probably more complex than some of those case studies that Paul just went through. But we're going to talk about the Kinneytown Dam Removal project that we're partnering with Save the Sound on. But first, I just want to talk a little bit about Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments, who I work for. Again, I'm the environmental planning director here. We're a regional planning organization for a 19-town region in the Naugatuck Valley. So Waterbury is our central city. Our board, so our bosses are really the 19 chief elected officials of those 19 towns. We really serve at their pleasure, and we work on projects that they find important. We have some mandatory work that we have to do. We are also the metropolitan planning organization, so we do a lot of the federal transportation planning in our region. But beyond that, we do the basic regional planning work. So we write our region's plan of conservation and development. We do a lot of community and housing planning, and my department focuses on environmental planning. The Naugatuck River is really has been central to our region since the beginning of humans here in the area, and it's going to be even more important in the future. We really think it's central to the revitalization of the region and to the quality of life of our residents. And like I said, it's been important for a really long time. Originally, before Europeans showed up here, Native Americans used the river for food. Naugatuck River is the largest tributary of the Housatonic. It stretches 45 miles from northwest Connecticut, and it drains an area of about 310 square miles. Before Europeans, migratory fish had free passage from Long Island Sound through the Housatonic River to miles of habitat in the watershed. The name Naugatuck is actually derived from an Algonquin term that translates roughly to something about a lone tree that marked an important fishing area. And that sort of hints at how important those salmon and shad and river herring and other species were to the Native Americans that lived here. It is also very important to European settlers. So the steep grade of the Naugatuck and the tributaries provided an ideal source of power for grist mills and sawmills early on, and then later the river was dammed extensively to power the production of textiles and copper and brass and all of the other industrial products that the valley was known for. And it really drove our economy for nearly 2 centuries. But all that industry took a toll on the river. Believe it or not, the Naugatuck River actually caught fire. This is one example, but we found several examples of the Naugatuck River catching fire because of all of the industrial waste that was dumped in. Raw sewage was also dumped into the river. The river was really dead, ever since the 1840s due to all of that industrial use. Anybody from the valley, and we were just talking about this earlier, anyone from the valley will tell you, or that was here at least in the 50s and 60s, will tell you about the river changing colors depending on what was being dumped upstream, and rolling up the windows when you went over bridges and stuff. So it was in pretty rough shape for a really long time. But we've come a really long way since then. Water quality improved dramatically beginning in the 1970s. Thanks in large part to environmental regulation and also the decline of some of the industries that were having the biggest impacts. The Naugatuck River's really made a huge comeback. Fish and birds and wildlife have returned, and people are now using the river to recreate. And our communities are really starting to, they turned their back on the rivers for so long, and now they're starting to embrace it. There's parks being built along the river. People are using it for paddling and fishing. I'm leading a big effort to help build a 44-mile multi-use trail along the entire route of the river. So it's a huge success story. In the 1990s, at the time, Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection saw that improvement and started to implement a plan to restore the Naugatuck River and remove barriers to fish. That included removing or bypassing dams along the Naugatuck and on tributaries. These are some of the more notable ones that were on Paul's chart earlier. The Chase Brass Dam, Anaconda Dam, Freight Street Dam, and Platts Mill Dam, all in Waterbury, were removed in the mid-90s, as was the Union City Dam in Naugatuck. In 1999, a fish ladder was opened at Kinneytown Dam. which is the first dam on the river. It's only a couple miles upstream of the confluence with the Housatonic. And at the top right, the Kinneytown Dam bypass was opened in 2014, which allowed fish passage around that dam, which couldn't be removed because it's basically holding up Route 8. So all of these efforts should have opened up the Naugatuck to migratory fish all the way up to Thomaston. But we now know that the fish ladder at Kinneytown Dam was never very effective and pretty much stopped working altogether in 2013. So let's take a step back and give a little bit of background on Kinneytown Dam. It is on the Naugatuck River it's in Seymour, really almost equidistant from the downtown of Seymour and Ansonia on the Naugatuck River. It was built in the 1840s to divert water into a series of canals that delivered it 2 miles downstream to Ansonia, where it powered factories. On the right side, just to the right of the train tracks on the right of the screen here, you can see that canal that's still there. It was retrofitted to produce hydroelectric power around 2010 along that canal in Ansonia. And in the 1980s, a larger modern powerhouse was built in Seymour at Kinneytown Dam. You can see that powerhouse on the left-hand side. You can also see the fish ladder sort of snaking to the side of it in between the river and the powerhouse. So that powerhouse, when they installed that powerhouse, the intent was to sell electricity into the grid. Hydroelectric facilities like this are regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. And this is considered a small hydro facility. So FERC issued a permit exemption in 1983. That's sort of a misnomer. It's not really an exemption of permitting. It's what our attorney likes to call FERC light. So there's still a bunch of requirements they have to abide by. They are still sort of permitted by FERC. They just don't have to go through as much permitting process as larger dams. As a condition of that exemption, they were required to do a number of things. They have to operate the powerhouses, they have to generate electricity, they have to maintain the facility. And when called upon to do so, FERC and resource agencies, they need to provide fish passage at the site, which is why that fish ladder that you can see on the screen there was built in the late 90s. And to just sort of give you all some context to some of the parts of the dam that we're going to be talking about. You can see Kinneytown Dam at the top of the screen there. There's an impoundment behind it that stretches all the way up into downtown Seymour. That impoundment is as we've found out, is pretty much full of sediment. You can see the Unit 1 powerhouse to the left of the dam spillway, along with that fish ladder. And then there's a canal gatehouse to the right of the spillway that provides a way for water to get underneath the train tracks and into a canal. That canal leads to Coe Pond. And then at the bottom of the screen is what we call the Unit 2 powerhouse. Even though that's the older powerhouse, it is the smaller powerhouse, and we refer to it as Unit 2. And there's a spillway there that goes back underneath the rail. So Coe Pond is impounded by a second dam that is more than 3,000 feet long, and an earthen embankment dam that holds Coe Pond up above the Metro North line, which you can see running between Coe Pond and the Naugatuck River. And that's all up above the river itself. So the reason why we know that the fish ladder at Kinneytown was not working and is still not working is, we owe a lot of that to Kevin Zach. Kevin Zach's a local environmentalist that actually lives on the Naugatuck River. He's the president of the Naugatuck River Revival Group. And he had noticed migratory fish below Kinneytown Dam and an absence of them above Kinneytown since the mid-2010s. He spent years documenting schools of fish below the dam, dead and dying fish at the base of the dam. He made some really moving videos that you can still see on YouTube if you search for Kevin Zach or Kinneytown Dam. And once he created all of this documentation, he started sharing it as widely as he could. And that included to organizations like Save the Sound and to me and to our staff at NBCOG, and also to several of our chief elected officials on our board. And it was our chief elected officials that, really pushed us at NBCOG and made it a regional priority to try to get to the bottom of this issue. So around 2018, we started working with Save the Sound to really look into the fish ladder and what was going on there. So with Kevin's assistance, NBCOG and Save the Sound started looking into that fish ladder. Paul, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the fish ladder quickly and just talk about some of the issues that we found.
Sure. So there had been several, almost a decade or more of fish monitoring video footage that was captured at that. And we set about analyzing some of that older data and found that passage was really pretty poor. And over the entire data set, there was something like 12 fish passing per year, something incredibly low. We also saw a drop-off happen around 2013. That was an indication of when that Ansonia power unit went offline. It started putting more spill over that spillway that you see in the front there. And with more spill over the spillway, that caused fish to miss the entrance of the fishway and travel up to the base of the dam, where they'd essentially be trapped and not be able to find a way around. The fishway was designed to function when both power units were functioning fully, and there was almost no flow going over the spillway. And as soon as the system started to break down and more spill was going over the spillway, that meant fish wouldn't find the entrance to it. And then ultimately, when the unit in Seymour went down, there was no discharge of flow going right next to the entrance to the fishway, and so fish had no chance of finding it. So it really started to break down pretty dramatically. So it had some structural deficiencies that did not help it in the beginning. Those zigzags you see right there are not recommended anymore. It was state of the art at the time, but that they're now recognized as very discouraging to fish behavior. So that they circle and they spin, but they don't ascend the fishway there. So between the structural deficiencies and the operational deficiencies, the fishway was never functioning as intended.
So, with that knowledge and the understanding that fish were not passing at the fish ladder, NBCOG partnered with Save the Sound and Kevin's group, the Naugatuck River Revival Group, to create the Naugatuck River Restoration Coalition. This was around 2019. And at first, we really focused on restoring that fish passage. So, like I said, the owner of the dam at the time was NL. Like I said, they're beholden to FERC. So we really started petitioning FERC to enforce the conditions of their permit exemption. And we really focused on fish passage. So we worked with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Connecticut DEP to develop and submit evidence that we had gathered to FERC to convince them that there was a problem and that they were not meeting those conditions. Around that same time in 2019, the NL, which is a large multinational corporation, sold the facility and a bunch of other similar facilities around the Northeast to a small startup called Hydroland. And it was also around this time, a little after this, and maybe in 2020, that we learned that the Unit 1 powerhouse had also broken down and was offline. So, we worked really hard. FERC issued a bunch of orders because of the work that we were doing to Hydroland to restore the power generation, to restore fish passage, to make safety improvements. Most of those orders went ignored by Hydroland, and it was clear that Hydroland did not have the ability to make the needed investments in the facility or to bring it into federal compliance. And all through this time, both powerhouses remained offline. And it would have really taken millions in investment to reactivate them. And again, there was just no attempt to restore that fish passage. So, it was really fish passage that got our attention in the first place, but the deeper we dug, the more concerns came to light. So, like I said, after about 2020, the facility no longer was operational and produced no electricity, provided no benefit to the community at all. It's in really poor condition. And since it's not commercially viable, there was very little investment made in it. The cost of bringing it back into compliance would be, would far outweigh the revenue that it could ever produce selling power to the grid. Hydroland was effectively abandoning it and indicated to FERC that they not have the ability to make even minor repairs. So it was just continuing to fall further and further into disrepair. And despite providing no benefit, Kinneytown was continuing to cause huge negative impacts. It's increasing flood risk up and downstream. It's negatively impacting water quality. It's a public health concern. It's blocking recreational access. The more we learned about this dam, the more we realized that, dam removal is probably the only option here to fix all of these harms. And at the same time, we were in conversations with the dam owner, and they were actually trying to resell this property and having no luck doing that. So, they sort of figured out, on a parallel course that, this facility is not economically viable. And, so they were looking for a way out. So, we really started developing an idea to remove Kinneytown Dam. And Paul, I'll hand it back to you for a few.
Yeah, I mean, as Aaron had said, the fish passage was sort of the thing that brought our attention to this, and Connecticut Deep developed their own plan to restore diatomaceous fish to the Naugatuck River watershed. And as they learned more about the condition of it and its lack of power generation and economic viability, they became convinced themselves, and the fact that the fishway was never operating the way they had hoped in terms of providing safe, timely, and effective fish passage. As they looked at the river system at large, they estimate, we estimate about 30 miles of main stem of river habitat for American shad, alewife, blueback herring. By their numbers, that's estimated 21,000 American shad, 140,000 alewife / blueback herring, and then an additional 30 some odd miles, so 70 some odd miles total for sea lamprey and American eel, including the tributaries. So numbers of like 6,000 sea lamprey that could be supported in this watershed. These kinds of numbers, these kinds of miles with a single dam removal are pretty uncommon in Connecticut. It's probably the first of that scale. We're only just beginning to look at other projects that come to this level. A lot of our small dam removals, like I had showcased before, were like a mile or 2 or 10 at most. So 30 miles from a single dam removal is a big deal. And these kinds of numbers of fish habitat, being able to support them was a really big eye opener for us and a strong motivator for us. Go ahead, Aaron. And of course, there are other benefits to removing the Kinneytown Dam as well. This has animation. Yeah, thank you. So realizing the upstream benefits, the upstream dam removals that have happened over the years, this would be a way to capitalize on that, not make them moot. Aaron mentioned briefly that the communities immediately upstream of the Kinneytown Dam are actually in a flood risk situation. This would be removing that situation, or at least improving it. There are health and safety concerns in the canals. They collect all sorts of debris and trash and polluted sediment right near residential neighborhoods in Ansonia. So they're presenting a health and safety concern. And of course, we're trying to restore access to the Naugatuck River at large. So there's multi-use trails and fishing access points we're hoping to create by the removal of this structure. And then, with the improved fishery, that should improve not just the access to do fishing, but actually improve the fishing itself with more types of fish to go after. And then bigger picture river function that not many people are thinking about is restore the natural sediment flows to the Naugatuck River.
So our planets sort of aligned in 2022. That summer, there was a funding that was available through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, through the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. NBCOG worked with Save the Sound to apply for NOAA's Restoring Fish Passage Through Barrier Removal grant program. And we actually got support from the dam owner. We had support from the governor, from our federal delegation. some really big support from Connecticut DEEP, including some matching funds. We had support from the Fish and Wildlife Service and EPA and a whole slew of others. And ultimately, we received an award of $15 million to begin the Kinneytown Dam Removal project. And here's sort of the general outline of what that project looks like. So we have already acquired the facility through the Connecticut Brownfield Land Bank, which is it's a nonprofit that is basically set up to hold environmentally compromised properties while restoration and rehabilitation can take place. We use that money as well to conduct the engineering design of the dam removal. We need to relocate sewer infrastructure. There's two sewer lines that go through the sediment upstream of the dam. Those have to be relocated to a new location before we can remove the dam. We need to decommission the facility through FERC. There's a whole process to do that, and ultimately remove the dam. And then after that, restore the river channel. During this entire process, we have to protect the railroad and Route 8. So the railroad and Route 8 are bound the impoundment very closely. So we have to make sure that whatever we do does not impact those facilities. And at the end of the day, we really want to develop recreational access and extend the Naugatuck River Greenway Trail through the property. And we're committed through this entire process to engage stakeholders and residents, and I guess it's part of what we're doing right now. So that $15 million is really the first funding, along with that $1.6 million that DEP committed through the special environmental program. But that was sort of just the first snowflake in this whole avalanche of funding that we're continuing to receive. So we have money in this project through the EPA Targeted Brownfield Assessment Program. EPA has been doing all of the assessment work on the sediments and on the property. We received a little under $3.5 million of congressionally directed spending in fiscal year 24 for the sewer relocation work. We have funding from DEP's Rec Trails program for the design of the Naugatuck River Greenway Trail that will go through the property. We have funding through DECD's Municipal Brownfield program. And last year, the state legislators authorized $25 million of state bond funding for the project. And then we just learned not too long ago that we're going to get some additional congressionally directed spending for the sewer work and some of the sediment work as well. So totally, we have committed a little over $50 million. We know that's not going to be enough to do this project, but we're continuing to look for additional funding all the time. And here's our sort of provisional timeline. There's still a lot of unknowns, and we're finding new answers to questions every day through the design process. But we've already done. We've started the design. We have GEI on board doing the engineering and design work for the dam removal. EPA has concluded all of their supplemental testing, although I think there might be a little additional testing we're going to have to do pretty soon. The Connecticut Brownfield Land Bank acquired the property for $1 last fall. And this year, we're really working on the sediment management plan, developing that, try to figure out what we can and can't do with all of the impounded sediment that's behind the dam. That's been sort of the biggest, the biggest issue, with the dam removal. There's something like 800,000 cubic yards of sediment behind the dam. There's more in Coe Pond as well. A lot of that has been contaminated from all of the upstream industrial uses. So we have to safely deal with all of that sediment before the dam could be removed. We're going to be working with our engineers to bring contractors on early on in the design project so that they can have a say in the process by which we're gonna do this, do the construction. We'll be starting the permitting and FERC decommissioning process later this year as well. And we're hoping to finish the sewer siphon design work pretty soon. And that will lead to sediment management in 2027 and 2028 and construction beyond that. So we're hoping right now that by 2029, maybe a little bit later, we'll all be able to enjoy a restored Naugatuck River in Ansonia and Seymour. So this is our last slide. We invite all of you if you'd like more information. This is a really big, complex project. There's a lot of history behind it as well. Invite you all to visit. We have a story map that really tells the whole story in an interactive way with maps and photos and videos. So we invite you to hit the QR code that's on your screen here, or go to our project webpage at nbcogct.gov/Kinneytown. And I'll just say that, this story map has really been instrumental from the very beginning of the project in raising awareness of the problem initially, getting the backing of our federal and state leaders and agencies, having a place to send reporters to when they're doing reporting on the project, and really just a way for us to have information that we need at the in an easy to locate place. So you can spend quite a while learning more about this project if you'd like to. And with that, I think Denise, we've got a little bit of time now for Q&A.
Yeah, thanks. This was a great presentation, and wow, Aaron, putting all that together. We know what it's like when you're getting multiple sources of funding and bringing all the agencies and everybody to bear. Lots of stuff going on with this project. This is a big one. There's some questions we have in the Q&A. Folks are welcome to put questions in Q&A and also chat. Me and Allie are going to be looking at them. I'm going to start with some that's the general topic, and then I think we'll probably have some questions on the specifics of the Kinneytown Dam.
You want me to stop sharing, Denise, or does it matter?
Sure. Yes. Thank you. So, after the incident at the Fitchfield Dam, there seemed to be a misconception that all dams aid in flood control. Can you speak to this? Probably Paul. I know I deal with this a lot. People don't understand what dams do or don't do. So if you could speak to that.
Yeah, a very small slice of the pie of dams actually provide any kind of flood control. They have to be built and designed for flood control in order to actually provide it. Some may have some ancillary sort of unintended ability to do that, but most of them aren't operated or maintained or inspected or do anything intentional for flood control. So what did I have here? I had 2%, 83 of the 4,800 dams across the state are for flood control. All the others are not.
Yeah, and I think it's simple hydrology, most of them, and when they're operating so that a lot of times there's water spilling over the dam, that means there's no flood storage, right? It's like it's full, so then you get, and even if it's dry and they're not getting the spillover, doesn't mean they have a lot of storage behind them. It doesn't, one rainfall event can get them spilling pretty quickly, so.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I'm just going to follow up. There's one quick question that kind of goes to that. And it kind of gets to those questions. So the last question, and this was from Alicia as well. How would you respond to those who see dam removal primarily as the loss of lakes and ponds? If we take out all these dams, we're not going to take out the dams. We're not going to have any lakes and ponds left in Connecticut.
I don't think that's the case. Of the 4,800 dams across the state, not all of them are providing a dam or a pond with a name and a person living along it or residents living along it. We're definitely not talking about removing in fact, a deal breaker to a project is if a dam is still providing a benefit. So if it's got a ton of landowners around it that are taking advantage of that pond and waterfront property and whatnot, that's usually a justification for keeping that dam in place. We're still looking mostly at the obsolete ones that really aren't providing many benefits to anyone. So There are plenty of natural lakes and ponds across the landscape. Some of them are enhanced by a dam, but it's the number of ponds and lakes are outnumber the number of dams, I think. So it's not about removing or eliminating that habitat.
That
Okay.
said, part of the Kinneytown Dam Removal project, we do have Pond, which is part of the canal system, which is it's a man-made lake. It has always been off limits to fishing and swimming and boating. But because the former owners were not really paying much attention, the folks that live in the neighborhood abutting the pond were using it for those reasons. So we have gotten pushback from those residents. And I think we've done a lot of work over the past 2 years with public outreach and trying to explain the situation. Pond is likely not going to be a pond, or certainly will not be a pond when our project is done. But there's a lot of other issues that Pond is causing that I think people are not aware of. So we've really pushed hard to try to get facts out in front of people, and I think we've seen most of those neighbors come around to understand what our project is doing. Pond is an industrial pond. It's dangerous to those neighbors if they're using it improperly. So we really want to make that safe for the neighbors in the long run. And I think trying to convey that benefit to people will hopefully outweigh what they're seeing as a loss.
Yeah, so just to build on that, because we have a question from Martha Smith, is what will happen to the canals in Pond? What's the plan?
So the plan is actually to use Pond as a repository for a lot of that sediment. The sediment that's in Pond now is actually more contaminated than what's behind Kinneytown Dam. So our working plan right now is to move a lot of that sediment into Pond and cap it and make it safe for passive use, at least in the long run. We do have a vision of using the canal and the Pond Dam and other features to possibly carry the Naugatuck River Greenway Trail. So at the end of this, we're going to make it safe for people to use it recreationally, which right now it's off limits to.
All right, thank you. Okay, and then we have a question from Kathy Scipio. How long will the Connecticut Brownfields Land Bank hold the property? Will there be a new owner, or what happens after that?
So right now, the land bank will hold the property until the construction's done and the restoration work is done. And right now the plan is to, like I said, we're planning to make this, some recreational asset, and likely we'll be handing it back to the two communities. So Ansonia and Seymour will likely hold most of this property in the long run.
All right,
The land bank's
thanks.
not, I don't think has any interest in holding land long term. I mean, they're there just to sort of hold the liability while we can do this work.
Okay, so we have another question. Which stakeholders or who do you come across the most when it comes to barriers to dam removal? I guess, like, what are the barriers and why do they come up? What are the largest barriers to dam removal?
Well, yeah, you usually need to have a willing landowner. That's that's one of the first obstacles to get over. If you've got a landowner that either you don't know, sometimes the dam is so derelict that it's abandoned and there is no designated landowner. You have to establish that. But if you do have a landowner that does not want to remove their dam, then you don't really have much of a project there. So that's the first effort. After that, there's a lot of misunderstandings, I think, about dam removal. There's the one that you already touched on, which is the assumed loss of flood control or some benefit like that. Sometimes small dams on small streams, people think it's the source of water for that watershed when it often is not. It's just a collector of water. So you have to get over some of those initial misconceptions that come with it. And then sediment is still perceived as always a pollutant, and in our case in Kinneytown it is because it's contaminated, but there's actually the superficial layer of it that's not really contaminated, and And sediment trapping and deprivation in downstream reaches is itself an impact. So we have a lot of education to do around that issue. And then there are sensitive species that can live upstream or downstream that could be immediately impacted by a dam, and they need to be protected. Like, for example, mussels, which we are trying to restore by removing dams. Sometimes mussels need to be in, there needs to be a mussel survey and be potentially harvested prior to a dam removal so that then they can be reintroduced and put back into the system. And then I just lost my train of thought on the last impact. Wow, slipped, just went right out. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, if you think of it, we can jump in. And I guess, Aaron, I think you just went over that one of the big barriers is putting the funding together. Can you talk about just quickly the challenges of doing that? I mean, it's huge.
It is, and like, even on the smaller projects, even when you can't, even when there's funding available, federal funding or state funding, there's often a match required. Coming up with that match is difficult for us in our communities, especially that for municipally owned dams that they're interested in. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and I think we owe a lot to Save the Sound and to some of our other environmental partners on this project in helping us find funding and make those arguments that we're not dam removal experts, we're not fish passage experts, so we really leaned on them to make those arguments to NOAA and to some of the other funders. I think you have to have a good grant writer, and you have to be able to make those arguments like clearly and concisely. And I'll say one, it's got maybe an anecdote, but when we were submitting our application, we thought a lot about the title of our application, and we really wanted to make it stand out. So our application was titled "It's About Dam Time," dam removal, and and honestly, our funders said it did get their attention. So I think maybe sometimes you have to think a little bit outside the box too. I don't know.
That's great.
So Denise, came back to me. The other item I was trying to think of that's an obstacle is the infrastructure, which is heavy on this project. We have Route 8 on one side and Route 8, actually, we didn't get into the details, but it was built out into the river when it was widened. So that's a problem for us. And then you have the railroad on the other end, on the other side. And then we have two sewer lines crossing, not under the river, just under the sediment. And so they are needing to be completely decommissioned, removed, and a whole new sewer line and sewer crossing rebuilt for this. So infrastructure is a huge factor in this project and is often a complicating factor in other dam removals. And it's actually the infrastructure that's upstream of the dam, especially if it's in the impoundment.
Thank you. And we are right at 1 o'clock. So thank you again to our presenters. I mean, it's a huge, I know that everybody's saying bravo. We've got a couple, thank yous and bravos in the chat and in the Q&A. So thank you. Just want to let folks know that the Water Planning Council Advisory Group and our Education and Outreach Committee will be posting this on our website where our other maps, where our other presentations are. So you'll be able to check it out there. It usually takes us a couple of days to get it up, but Allie will get that done. And we'll be looking at continuing our webinar series on realizing resilient watersheds in September, and we'll be focusing that time on source water protection. We don't have our exact topic yet, but we're going to be doing it during Source Water Protection Week. And so we'll see you. We're taking the summer off on our webinars, and we'll see you again in September. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.